Today's conversation is going to be highlighting what's it like building a CPG brand in Chicagoland and the Midwest and how to be successful. This is part one of a two-part series. The second conversation is going to be happening in about 2 weeks, so you'll get an invite for that, and we'll be talking with retailers for that conversation, which I'm really excited about to get their perspective on everything that's new and innovative. So for today's panel, I would like to introduce our guests today. So first we have Joel Warady. And Joel, I'll offer you a quick introduction, currently with Catalina Crunch and previously Enjoy Life Foods.
Sure, thanks, Jordan. As Jordan mentioned, I'm on my third startup. Years ago, I owned a toothbrush and dental floss and whitening company.
Oh, I had no idea about that.
I know, well, I'm older, so I've had previous lives. I had that business, which I started here in Chicago and successfully sold, then transitioned to Enjoy Life, which we were successful in growing over a 15-year period before selling it to Mondelez. And then I stayed on and ran it from Mondelez for about 4.5 years. And currently I'm president of Catalina Snacks, which we make Catalina Crunch cereal and cookies. And my role has been first as a mentor to the founder of Catalina, and then joined as president in August of last year. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out, because I am such a Chicago fanboy, that I'm also chairman of the Chicagoland Food and Beverage Network. So I'm a big Chicago booster.
Love that, Joel. And you've had the experience to watch lots of emerging brands kind of grow and rise from Chicago. And so I know you have lots of insights there as well. Next, I'd like to introduce Emily with Lil Bucks.
Hey, I'm Emily with Lil Bucks. I'm the founder and CEO. We make crunchy snacks and breakfast toppings from the super seed sprouted buckwheat. And yeah, came up through Chicago, started from the bottom, founded the business when I was 25 without any really previous CPG experience. So, really leaned on the community every time I'd find out about something like this. I was on it, going through the hatchery and all that. So kind of had the perspective of being the ultimate startup, starting a very natural food brand in the Midwest.
Yep, love that. And Emily's been introducing a very kind of new ingredient to kind of I won't say the world, but to the US from around the world. And so lots of learnings there, and you've been doing a great job with that. And then we also have Perteet Spencer with IO Foods.
Morning, everyone. Super excited to be here. Perteet Spencer, co-founder of IO Foods. IO launched in July of 2020, really in celebration of food I grew up eating, celebrating the flavors and ingredients of the West African diaspora. We've started in frozen and have quickly scaled. So we're now, we just launched hot sauces a couple weeks ago, so be on the lookout for those. I was raised in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and now based in Chicago. So Midwest is kind of solely responsible for all of my both personal and professional experiences. And it's been just a great community to grow up in. So excited to chat today.
Awesome. And then we have our resident expert on all things kind of retail and merchandising, Tina with Survey.
Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here and put a spotlight on the greater Chicago area and the Midwest. I'm Tina Adolfsson. I'm the VP of Marketing at Survey.com, and we do retail merchandising at scale. So anything that can be done within the four walls of the store, we are here to help emerging brands, natural brands, and leading brands look better on shelf and win at the shelf. Thank you.
Love it. And thanks so much, everyone, for being here. So just a quick format for today. We have some awesome questions for our panelists to get really into the meat of this. And then at the end of the conversation, we'll have probably a little bit of time for open Q&A. But if you do have questions throughout, feel free to drop those into the chat directly, and then I will ask those to our panelists. All right, let's get started. So I want to just open up the conversation with understanding what's been your experience of launching specifically products in Chicago and the Midwest, in terms of pros and cons. And maybe we'll start with Perteet, since you are the newest to launch.
Of course, I think the kind of ecosystem of the Midwest has been key to our success to date. What's interesting about the Midwest is you've just got such an interesting composition of both manufacturers, retailers, and just this ecosystem that really fosters innovation. So Jordan, I totally agree with you that I feel like the Midwest kind of gets overlooked in some conversations as you look at kind of some of the great innovation that's come out of even Chicago over the past few years. I came from Big CPG, so I was at General Mills for a long time based in the Twin Cities. But as I think about kind of IO's quick journey, we wouldn't be kind of on the path we're on today without this like tremendous ecosystem of the Midwest. And so we started as a hatchery brand as well, Emily. Our seed founders, our seed investors are based in Chicago here. Some of our early retail partners are also based in the Midwest, in Chicago specifically. So as I think about that ecosystem in particular, it's not only been a great way to kind of get our brand up and running, but also serve as a great blueprint to help us scale. So, one example I can share is, thinking about the hatchery, they connected us with Mariano's, who's looking for support of local brands, got placement in Mariano's in February, and that's really paved the way for a much broader expansion beyond to other Kroger banners. And so as I think about that whole ecosystem kind of working in our favor, I think it's a great testimony to the power of the Midwest, but not only Midwest in general, just for brands that might not be based in the Midwest, really using the power of your local networks in totality to really help kind of catapult your brand to new places.
No, I love that. And I love that you talk about the ecosystem, because I think that's where the Midwest is incredibly strong, and like connecting this big CPG base that's here with kind of new innovative companies, right? You think of General Mills as the Midwest, Kellogg, MARS Wrigley, Tyson, like dozens of kind of big CPG companies. Joel, what's been your kind of experience in building that ecosystem here in terms of, what are some of the great companies or resources that other founders should be taking advantage of?
Yeah, well, I think, just to build on what Perteet said, it's the ecosystem is here, but it's here for a reason. It's because we have a culture in Chicago to grow brands and specifically grow food brands. So if you go back into the history of why Chicago is as big a city as it is, it's all based around food. Whether it was the stockyards and the early meat companies, or companies like Nabisco, which started as National Biscuit Company here in Chicago. Chicago has always been a city that revolved around the development of food and new products. So I think, while people talk about the coast as well as Boulder, those tend to see highs and lows. Whereas I think in the Midwest, and specifically Chicago, we have a culture of kind of putting our head down, keep pushing forward, and moving that product from development on shelf. And I when you ask about the ecosystem itself, so certainly we know about the hatchery and Good Food Accelerator and other accelerators that exist. But let's keep in mind that, when it comes to natural food distributors, we have the second largest distributor based here in Chicago. In food service, we have food service that's based in Chicago. We have the largest natural food broker based in Chicago and Presence. So, Chicago really is the center of the nation when it comes to new product development in food.
Emily, what's been your experience with like getting into retailers and getting into distribution here in Chicago, and like who have some of those key partners been?
Yeah, I mean, we started, I mean, I'll just say like with our goal to build America's buckwheat brand, even though the type of product we're making, it's very health trend forward. So sometimes you might think of that being a coastal idea or something that starts on the coast, but I think it's been just so beneficial for us to start in the Midwest because we're able to speak to everyone about our products, not just the coastal elites that we joke about. And so that really helped in the initial like first 2 years when we weren't in grocery distribution yet. We were working with, we did start working with Pod Foods, which was a great resource to start helping to service some of our first accounts. And I would say even just get into 5 accounts and learn how to turn and support those accounts. So we did Chicago Health Foods, Belly's Juice Shop. They have a great little mini grocery selection. Dill Pickle Co-op, Sugar Beet Co-op. Those are 2 of like the best co-ops in the Midwest. And supporting those, and then kind of learned how to get velocities up, get turns up, build the community, more specifically in Chicago, because that's where we started, and really tapping into the wellness community. And of course, this is like the 3rd biggest city in the country. So there's plenty of, you know, demographic for everything. So really tapping into our target audience, starting with, you know, health and wellness, like people at fitness, yoga studios, stuff like that. And then our big kind of break was, there's actually, I would say 2. One was Whole Foods. We went straight into the Midwest region, which was kind of wild to go from like 5 stores to the Midwest region. So tons of learning lessons there. And of course, that's really what catapulted us onto a bigger stage, so to speak. But also, I think one of the challenges is that the Midwest is so vast, and there's individual communities in each, you know, with the Whole Foods Midwest, for example, we're in Minnesota, Wisconsin, which is Madison, Milwaukee, different parts of Michigan, northern Indiana, Indianapolis, you know, the list goes on, obviously Illinois, which is mostly Chicago. But you're thinking about tapping into multiple communities in each place, whereas some other regions, it's still a little more localized because it's more densely populated. So that's been something that, you know, has been a good marketing challenge. Actually, we're working with survey.com to help with, you know, we obviously have a presence in Chicago to be on the ground and doing merchandising demos, but we're working with Survey to kind of like get all of those places to have a presence and build that community where we can't physically be all the time. And the other one, same with AO, is Mariano's has been an amazing partner. And we also got that through going through the hatchery. And I mean, it just goes to show, you know, out of the gate, great turns. And that just goes to show like this community, this tight knit community we built in Chicago and the greater suburbs around it. Once we launched into a place like Mariano's, which is considered more conventional, even if it's high-end conventional, with like a health brand like ours to do well in the Midwest, is I think it's like a great victory story and kind of shows that we can take this to other parts of the country.
Awesome. So many things to dive in there. So Emily, I wanted you to touch on like, what has been those challenges of being a Chicago-based brand, but then launching in the Midwest? Because as you mentioned, it's very spread out. Each city has its own kind of personality and consumer base. What did you learn kind of from doing demos in the Chicago area to then having to support sales in the broader Midwest? And what are some of the challenges been there?
Yeah, I mean, we also launched into Whole Foods in March of 2020. So there's like, you know, some challenges that were like just based on pandemic and craziness in general. But I would say I mean, one of them that I think now a solution we came to with survey.com was great to have that presence and checking on stores in places where we can't physically be there to build as great of relationships with the individual stores. But I mean, really something that's worked for us, we just try to think of, okay, how do we create this community in Chicago? It was the, you know, health and fitness studios, samplings, digital marketing, local awareness ads, trying to find local influencers in each town. And there is a different you'll start to notice kind of different local things that people love and are really passionate about, and brands that you might want to work, collaborate with. Like we've done some work with like a Indianapolis gluten-free bread brand, and kind of tapping into the audience there. One challenge, this is a funny one. So I would say do your research, but this is like a great, just learning situation from someone who didn't have experience in the industry. But when we got a few demos in before the pandemic hit at Whole Foods, and we did a couple at some Indianapolis Whole Foods stores, and you would think, well, like Indianapolis, there's it's like a big metropolis and it's Whole Foods, like people shopping at Whole Foods know about natural foods, right? And my brand ambassador there was demoing, and we had a matcha flavored Lil Bucks, which we still sell online and it's delicious. But people outside of Chicagoland, we started hearing in our early demos, didn't even know what matcha was. So we're like, oh gosh, matcha flavored sprouted buckwheat. We are doing way too much. We came in way too hot, and we are no longer selling that in Whole Foods. So that's just kind of a learning of being, maybe if you do have a big trend, pairing that with flavors that the general population of America loves, and because that's what you're going to be marketing to. And you can bring the Midwest something new, but don't come in too hot with like 800 trends at once.
No, I think that's so key. And I was literally just having a conversation 20 minutes ago with another great founder who's on this call as well about just in general, it's when you're launching a new product, start with something that people are familiar with, and then build on it and add kind of 1 or 2 points of differentiation instead of trying to do 10 things at once. Because, in general, across the country, it's much easier to get those initial sales and adoption if you're like something else but better than like nothing else anyone's ever seen before. I know Chicago and the Midwest has this bias too of being like very much a food centric region, but a lot of that food centricity is based on like restaurants and the restaurant scene, right? Like these cities have amazing restaurant scenes, and it's just now getting into the product space in terms of what's great and new. Perteet, I want to kind of come back to you on like what's it been like working with Mariano's, and especially launching your frozen products and having West African flavors, and what that experience has been like.
Yeah, Mariano's has been such a tremendous launch partner. And so I think they've shown kind of express commitment to local brands, which has been wonderful. Because I think they've really welcomed us with open arms and helped, because we're local, really help shine a good spotlight on IO, be it incremental display opportunities or co-social marketing opportunities. So we've been super, super appreciative to Mariano's for the support. Emily, I'd say we had a similar learning in terms of like coming in hot, like for me, the items we launched with are all the items I grew up eating, so they didn't seem kind of too different to me. But you realize that we are doing something different in the market, and so that's really been good learning around kind of mix and retailer fit, and knowing kind of what markets, what retailers are a good fit for your proposition. And so as I think about Mariano's, they're a great example of a partner who started with our two, I call them kind of known inputs models. So kind of ingredients that are familiar, but kind of familiar twist that we're offering through IO. And then we'll be expanding on that base with some new innovation in the next few weeks. So we've been super, super appreciative for their partnership. But I'd say, they weren't our first kind of Chicago partner. There's a lot of great, like smaller independents here who took a chance on us.
Who are some of those companies?
I think Green Grocer is a great example, Valley Produce in Evanston. And so Open Produce in Hyde Park where we live. And so, I think it speaks to the beauty of like making the ecosystem work, and that the big retailers are certainly really, really important. But for us, it was like some of the smaller ones who took a risk on us early on that we're equally appreciative too.
And then maybe for those who don't know, can you describe what like Mariano's is as a store? They've kind of changed it a little bit, but kind of what that experience is like shopping there.
Yeah, so I should also say I'm from the land of super specialty grocery. So Minneapolis is known for like Lund's and Mariano's and Kowalski, and so it was a format that was somewhat familiar to me when I moved to Chicago. But essentially, Mariano's have about 40 stores across Chicagoland. And it's a more premium grocery experience. And so you're going to find kind of bigger prepared food sections around the perimeter. You know, as we do store checks from time to time, we often find people hanging out at their bar having a glass of wine kind of midday. So it's much more of an experience versus some of the kind of more conventional leaning retailers.
I know there was one Mariano's in Bronzeville, Chicago, that was known as like Bar Mariano's. Like people would go there like to hang out and on
yeah, like Thursday nights at that Mariano's got pretty crazy.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting. Have any of you worked with Foxtrot?
Yeah, so we've done some work with Foxtrot, both with Catalina as well as some of the brands on whose boards that I sit. I think Foxtrot is an interesting experiment. You know, certainly higher end and selling at a premium price. But I think what's unique about Foxtrot, both in the Chicago, Dallas, and DC stores, is to see whether or not you can create a gourmet, in essence, convenience store, get that higher price. I think, you know, the jury's still out. I mean, they certainly have raised capital to allow themselves to expand. I think the turns are good. Now we've got to see them get great. But I think to their credit, they're willing to experiment on a lot of new brands, and they're willing to take merchandising advice from the brands themselves.
No, that's amazing. You know, I was just talking to another brand not too long ago, and I found with Foxtrot that, and for those who don't know, it's kind of like a hybrid high-end convenience store plus online shopping experience. And they were kind of the first to launch one of those models. Some products do extremely well there, and others like completely fall flat. And I think there's kind of those two ends of the spectrum. And so it's definitely something to try, but I don't know, there's probably some data they have around like who actually performs better than others and which categories, but it tends to be fairly kind of separated in how well you do there.
Yeah, but one thing, Jordan, that I would mention, since you mentioned Foxtrot, is I'd encourage people to look at what GoPuff is doing. And GoPuff is very regionalized. And GoPuff, if you're not familiar, offers delivery within 25 to 30 minutes through micro fulfillment centers, and they are willing to take regional product as a test to see how well it sells in specific zip codes. And I think their model is interesting. They're in about 650 zip codes currently. If that I think that number's right. It may be greater, and they've just raised about a crazy amount of money, valuing them at about 1.8 billion. So I think it's an interesting model to watch.
Joel, do you know if GoPuff will take products outside of their warehouse region, or have you heard anything about that?
They won't take it outside of their warehouse region, but their warehouses are becoming increasingly everywhere. And they're adding new warehouses all the time. And the other thing, if you have a frozen product or refrigerated, I mean, that is a great advantage of GoPuff because they sell refrigerated and frozen products. And they're also willing to allow you to promote. And so, you know, we've been doing some things with GoPuff via Instagram. And if you think about it, it's very much a high impulse sale for people who want to eat something within 25 or 30 minutes of thinking about it. I personally have tested it numerous times myself. They do get it to you within 30 minutes. It's pretty amazing.
Oh, that's cool. And Joel, I want to kind of ask you too, because you've now kind of built two different types of companies. Now with Catalina Crunch kind of launching online as e-commerce brand and expanding into grocery, what's that experience has been like, and any learnings in terms of working with retailers or customer base, or even how that data translates to buyers?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we did start as a direct-to-consumer brand, and early on, while our direct-to-consumer was growing dramatically, we saw that there was an opportunity in brick and mortar for a keto-friendly cereal. So we quickly pivoted, and what we would do is we would go to the retailers. Whole Foods was our first retailer, and we would show them the data that we were getting online. So we would show them the number of orders that we were receiving daily. We also were showing them what regions of the country were heavy users. And we used that data to help get into our early retailers. And this will sound amazing, but Krishna, the founder of Catalina, closed Whole Foods National over the phone and through the mail. He literally sent samples and said, "You'd be making a mistake not to have our product on shelf." And the buyer responded and said, "Okay, we'll put 3 SKUs on." And when he told me this, I said, "Well, I don't think that's possible." And he said, "No, here are the POs." So I think what it does show you is that if you have a great product and if you have a great story behind the product, retailers like Mariano's and like Whole Foods will absolutely take a chance on you and work with you. Even if you're making some early mistakes, they'll definitely work with you and help you correct those.
What's been the adoption of trends like keto? I won't say trend, but like products like keto products in the Midwest versus in other regions?
So I think it's an interesting question, because we certainly see healthy trends tend to be adopted quicker on the coast, but then they also dissipate quicker on the coast. And so, one of the things that we try and do with a keto-friendly product is really focus on the attributes, the low sugar, low carbs, higher protein, as opposed to getting caught up in a trend like gluten-free or keto-friendly. That being said, what I would encourage everyone who's on this call is, when a trend happens, embrace it. When we had Enjoy Life, that was a gluten-free, allergy-friendly company, no one knew what we were talking about when it came to allergy-friendly, because we were the first company. But gluten-free got very hot. So what we would say is, we're a gluten-free plus company. We're gluten-free plus we're free of the top 8 allergens. And that helped us get on shelf, because we in essence changed the story behind the brand to take advantage of a trend that we saw.
I love that, Joel, because I think contrary, a lot of people talk about like, don't follow trends and don't take advantage of it. And I think when they say that, what it really comes down to is, don't maybe not name your company like the keto company or the paleo company, but it's definitely beneficial to embrace the fundamentals of why people are embracing some of these trends.
Right.
I love that. Tina, I'm kind of curious what you've seen or heard about some of the retail partners in the Midwest, or any of them that are starting to like make a splash, or if you've seen there's more of a traditional set of retailers in the Midwest compared to other regions.
What I actually see in the Midwest is much more of a range. So they have many that are independent or natural and make their own decisions, have a lot of say and independence in what they are doing for assortment and choice of where they're locating things in the store. So putting the organics together or putting the plant-based together versus keeping them all apart. You see both ends of that in Chicago. We also see 7-Eleven just having an incredible presence and being very easy and very convenient to get to, in addition to a bunch of different independent stores that are just like micro groceries. Not exactly the bodega of a Manhattan kind of a grocery store, but very similar. And finally, everyone has their own local where you go when you have to plan a party. And I've never heard people be so enthused about something like Binny's as people in the greater Chicago area. I mean, like, you don't plan a party without them. So what has been really great for us is understanding how unique Chicago is and greater Chicago is, and being able to give the founders the tools to do micro execution, because we very much believe that you know, in your category in 7-Eleven in Boston, where I'm located, so I am part of the East Coast, 7-Eleven in Boston, 7-Eleven in Chicago, and 7-Eleven in California are going to be very different, even for that same protein bar category or that same functional beverage category or for sparkling water. Binny's is doing incredibly well with this entire hard seltzer and even clean hard seltzer wave that is going. So White Claw started there, and it seems like there's a little bit of a one-upmanship going on in beverages that sparkle and make your summer more sunshiny. And finally, the creativity that founders and their teams come up with, not only in their products and their product flavors and assortment, but also in how to describe. I think that is something that we very much see, and they can go into something like the Mariano's and put signage that explains what they do and what they are and how they're unique and differentiated in a different way that you might not be able to do in a nationwide or in a more established rule-based grocer. So I love the variety that Greater Chicago has, and it's allowed us to offer up the ability to do micro execution. We define the shelf as the product, so the category, the location, and that goes down to even the neighborhood, and finally the retailer. Each one makes slightly different choices. And when the founders really partner with them and do what works for that retailer, that shopper, that's when you start to see the offtake, the velocity, and the trial.
Awesome. I love that. And I think you're totally right that there's like everything and in the Midwest in terms of retailers. There's some stores that are like heavily focused on produce and freshness. There's a lot of like medium-sized stores and then smaller footprint stores, and everyone's a little bit different. And so I love all the kind of stores being dropped in the chat as well, like Toto's and Dom's, which we're going to have the co-CEO of Dom's on our next webinar in a couple of weeks. So that's going to be super exciting for all the work that they're doing. They're kind of building up this awesome presence here in Chicago to grow from the previous kind of founder of Dominic's as well. So lots more to come there. Emily, I'm kind of curious from your perspective on using, leveraging digital marketing to grow in-person and brick and mortar sales at the partners you're working with. What works, what maybe doesn't work, and any tips and nuggets you found?
Oh my gosh, that's something I was actually just thinking about going through this. And I think it's something that, you know, I came from a social media background, working at social media agencies before starting Lowbuck. So what I lacked in CPG, I could at least make up for on the digital side. So when the pandemic hit, excuse me, we quadrupled our e-commerce sales and really relied on that digital community we created, which was especially strong in Chicago. So that really helped keep our velocities up and continue to sell through online and in stores. And so now we're kind of trying to replicate that strategy, being in some other Midwest cities, and we just expanded distribution in California. So I actually heard this from a Canadian company called Midday Squares. I just saw them carried in Foxtrot, and they just launched in the Sprout, so they're getting pretty big. But there's some webinar where they were saying they try to, I don't know like if the numbers here are like exact true or false, but they try to, before launching into a city, have 4% of the population equal to their following. So you can look at your social digital followings and see where people are located and try to kind of have 4% of it. I was like, well, do you really have 4% of all of Los Angeles? That's like a lot of people. But so maybe it's a little more localized than just an entire city, but they try to get to 4% of a localized following before launching into a region, and then building that up to 6% when they are actually on shelf there. So I thought that was a really interesting way to distill, social can be so, some of it's qualitative and quantitative, and it's hard to know sometimes what's working, what's not. But that is a great way to like bring it down to the numbers. And we've certainly experienced that in Chicago. And then now something we're trying to do in California. I would say email marketing has been really big for us. Some people, I don't know, there's arguments over whether that's dead or not, but it's really something you own. So when I was starting out, and now that fortunately we can start doing sampling events again and farmers markets, which was kind of how I built the company, always finding a fun way to collect emails and then immediately building that relationship after, send them their discount code. And this all sounds like e-commerce strategies, but it's totally what helped us succeed in Whole Foods and Mariano's. So like when we launched in Mariano's, we already have customers like, oh, I'm just gonna go get it there because they're already shopping there for all their groceries. So I think that's been huge. And while, you know, we have experience, I would say I've noticed that the algorithm changed on Instagram, and we aren't, you know, we used to be able to use that to reach everyone so closely and, you know, have a huge engagement. And that's really how we built a lot of the business. It seems like the algorithm changed and now we have a hard time reaching them. So it just goes to show, like, don't put all your eggs in one basket, because if you're totally rely on Instagram, you could wake up one day and like, why is only 50 people seeing this story? Like, we used to have like 1,000 people engaging with this. So it ebbs and flows there, but email's always been a way to, we have their emails, they read them, you know, it's a way to reach them and keep them up to date.
Have you experimented with SMS at all?
Yeah, we're actually just about to start that. So I think that's a really fun way to, you know, it's, I think, even higher open rate than email for sure, because it actually gets delivered to phones. And right now our texts don't get filtered into a spam folder. So you don't want to overdo it. I've been studying some brands, Olipop, Magic Spoon, some of those bigger ones that have text programs. And we're going to try to do maybe just 2 texts a month to start. So not too crazy. But then one that's focused on e-com, and then one, if we can filter it to Chicago ones, to do something more fun around, you know, like we just launched at Dom's in Chicago, or something with Mariano's.
Nice, I love that. And then Christy had a question asking, is low sugar trending down in the Midwest? She's heard that it's really skewed towards an older demographic, and would love to hear if there's any like regionality to like hearing anything about like low sugar claims.
Well, certainly we're not seeing it trending down. I mean, you know, we see, we think low sugar is the holy grail. We think it's what everyone is shooting for because of the obesity in America today. I think if you go into the store, you'll see that Hershey has a complete low sugar line, and because that wasn't enough for them, they paid $425 million for a Lily's, which is a low sugar line. I think low sugar continues to be a trend. I think it's going to become more of a reality, just kind of a base, so the trendiness will go away. But I think the key is taste. I think we've all experienced stevia and monk fruit aftertaste. And so what companies are trying to figure out is how you can create a great tasting low sugar product that doesn't cause gut health issues. And so I think we're really in the infancy of what people are going to be able to do with low sugar.
Going back to that, you're absolutely right. And the one thing that needs to happen with food and beverage and anything that is taste and texture is you need to experience it. And if you're actually getting a sample either in the store, which is obviously great because it's right there next to the purchase, and very often you're putting that demo sample and you have a basket of those products right there, or you're close to the refrigerator where they can grab it. It really kind of does a lot to overcome any questions that you might have on taste and texture. We're all happy that brand ambassadors in stores is coming back. And one of my colleagues, Joanna, is excellent at putting the right program for the right brand, for the right retailer in place for you.
Yeah, one thing I would say, Tina, I think you're right. I think in sampling, you know, what a lot of us think we want to do when we have open samples is taste it and then sell it. And I think it's a real education process when you're doing a proper in-store program, Because one of the things that we have found, again, with products that have stevia and monk fruit, is that if you've been consuming a lot of sugar, your initial taste of that product is going to be off-putting. And so we now, when we do open sampling, we educate people that you have to try the product for 4 to 6 days to train your taste buds. And I think that in our sampling programs and with our brand ambassadors, that's part of our education process.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And I also think it has a lot to do with the category. When you're talking about a category like cereals, you know, people have grown up with a very sugary, fake colors, you know, magic stars kind of a cereal. And that is a huge change to a natural. Other categories have maybe a little bit shorter of a road, but I totally agree with you, Joel. Emily, what have you found for that?
I was just laughing because I remember once I was doing a demo at Sugar Beet in Oak Park, and someone literally, I mean, for the most part, people like, oh my gosh, the crunch, this is great. But someone like, I think she might have even spit out the cacao Lobux in front of me, and she's like, this is not sweet at all. And I was like, I wasn't telling you it was sweet. And then her wife came up after, was like, she drinks 3 Coca-Colas a day, so she's not gonna. I'm like, all right, well, you know, can't win them all. But all that to say, I mean, of course, it's a big adjustment for a lot of people. And then on the flip side, I have something like, I even in our product development, I have to, you know, get a wider, you know, product testing and approval because my taste buds are like really sensitive to sweetness because I generally go low sugar. But yeah, I would say similar to what Joel said, it's almost not even a trend anymore, but just the future of food is that we're moving away from, as a population, you know, everything being really saturated with unnecessary sugars. So that's great. As something like, you know, institutions take a long time to transform. So I think it's just like part of, we're on that journey. But I think, you know, it's almost like not even leading that trend. It's just like, this is something made from whole foods. It's low sugar, and that benefits not only the older population that needs to watch out for that, but, you know, Gen Z, millennial that are not looking for these fake sugars or unnecessary added sugar. So, you know, it's kind of great to just build that base in right now. And then I think I just don't really see that going away.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because in every single survey about food, taste is still like the #1 important attribute that people look for, right? It's like something that's so visceral for us all. And I think especially in the Midwest, like you said, Emily, like there's just like
Honest.
Yeah, people are like really honest, and people are less willing to eat foods that don't taste good for health or for a diet. Like there's obviously still a lot of people that will, but less so than in other regions.
I would actually argue that's great too for like our product development being in something that could not taste good if we didn't, you know, like I think at our first event we did Taste of Randolph, and it was so amazing for us because we were still making everything out of a shared kitchen. And so getting feedback live, like people really love the cacao one, except for that one lady who drinks Coca-Cola, but you know, chocolate, very, you know, it makes sense to people. The matcha one, they're like, oh, it needs some work, let's add some vanilla. And I think the Midwest, if you can appease that taste bud, you can appease anyone. So now versus if we like launched in California and like, you know, people are willing to sacrifice taste for health benefits, then I think we would have come across America and, you know, not done as well. So
yeah, that's so true.
Huge, one of the biggest benefits, I think, to starting our brand here.
I think the other thing on top of that is also taste appeal. I remember with T-squares, and like our products have like a similar color to them. And like people would look at our product and they're like, literally someone came up and was like, that looks like bird food. And it was like, I can't complain. I can't like deny you because like millet is one of the #1 ingredients in bird food. So like, yes, there's a reason, but like people can eat it too and it's really healthy. But like someone just felt the need to come up to me and say like, that looks disgusting. But then other people, right, we got a comment of people would try it and they say, huh, this tastes a lot better than I thought it would. And so like the look and the taste appeal goes a long way in terms of getting that decision to buy.
Oh, totally. Always a learning experience there.
A couple of questions that came in just about Go Puff, and maybe for Joel and other people, but Phil had a question with GoPuff building out micro fulfillment centers and companies like DoorDash and kind of growing in terms of this online fulfillment. What do you think is going to be the impact of on retail for like millennials and Gen Z in terms of their food or grocery buying?
Well, I think retailers are going to have to evolve. I mentioned my past. Well, I spent 8 years working for Dominick's, for those of you who remember Dominick's in Chicago. And I think what retailers are going to have to evolve into is more of a food as theater location. I think Dom's is doing that today, that the in-store experience has to be a true experience. But for the purchasing of staples, I think more and more people will find the GoPuffs and the DoorDashes a convenient alternative than going to the store. So I think retailers will remain. I think what retailers sell to consumers will continue to evolve. A lot more prepared foods in the retailers. Staples, I think we'll start to see more and more of it go to delivery.
Yeah, I think that's true, because even with Dom's, they originally were launching as Dom's like grocery or in kitchen, and they actually switched their name around to be Dom's Kitchen and Grocery. So their focus shifted to being closer to prepared foods and that gourmet experience with a smaller grocery set.
Right.
And so, for everyone, it's interesting because if you look at a normal grocery store now, there's sometimes 4, 8 facings of the same products, and I think we're going to see a downsizing and shifting of that, and maybe just having 1 or 2 facings per SKU. So maybe some of the assortment sizes will go smaller, but I think there's just going to be more of a hybrid model out there. I don't think from what I've seen, retail is going to completely go away there. All right. And then I don't know, Lane will kind of follow up question on getting in touch with companies like GoPuff, because I know sometimes it's hard to get in touch with their buyers. So we can kind of follow up and see if there's any information on buyers to talk with, or anyone to kind of pitch to there. All right, any other questions? We have about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure we get all of your questions answered. So feel free to drop those in the chat, or if you'd like to come up on stage, feel free to raise your hand. In the meantime, from our panelists, anything that you've seen is really important for someone to know if they're launching in the Midwest?
I guess I would just say, similar to the taste and the appeal of the look of your product, but when you're developing it here, I think launching in the Midwest, if your goal is to go national, which I think a lot of our goals are to do that, or beyond, you're going to be appealing to the larger American population, which is one of the most diverse in the world. So really thinking about such a great opportunity to think about your messaging. And like Joel was saying, like thinking about your trends, just that simple switch to talking about gluten-free, and then kind of putting the other allergen friendly stuff later on, to help them catapult, on the back of that trend is huge. So I think the Midwest just offers that opportunity where there's a lot of honesty. You're going to have so many learnings. There's a really diverse population in terms of the types of food people like to eat. So you hone in on what's going to work for everyone you consider in your future target audience. And that's been huge for us with the natural brand and how we talk about low bucks.
Appreciate that. We had a question from Miss Lisa Marsh, if you want to come up and ask that.
Good morning, everyone. I just had questions about samplings. We've been really hitting the samplings really hard at Whole Foods Market, where we have products. And mine is a 2-part question. One, do you think it's very important for the consumers to see the actual owner, like me, in the stores, conducting the demos, talking to them? And Whole Foods is now going to transition back to open demo containers, because now we're doing prepackaged ones where it has to be ready and prepackaged before you get there. But they're going to open it up again in July to open containers. What are your thoughts on that? And is everybody ready?
I mean, I'll say on the open container thing, very excited about that. This is just my opinion. So I'm interested to hear what everyone else thinks, especially Tina, with you guys doing so many at Survey. But I think, for us, food is so experiential, and getting someone in that peak moment of enjoyment where they're trying your granola and they're like, oh my gosh, I love these flavors or fruits in it or whatever. I need to have it now, versus taking it home. They forget to use it. I still got a bunch of samples sitting in my pantry at home. They're probably great products, but like, it's just not the same as having something in the store and getting excited. I mean, I'm the first to get way overexcited and buy something on the spot. So I think open, and it's cheaper too. So we're excited to do open container, but again, interested to see what everyone else thinks. And then in terms of the founder being there, I'm honestly figuring that out myself, because before the pandemic, it was still just me, and I was doing all the events and demos, and that's how we built the initial business. And we're just starting to open up, and now we have a team of 3 and are starting to work we are working with survey.com with additional brand ambassadors in cities that we aren't in, because we just can't be everywhere in the Midwest. It's a very large region, and California. But so yeah, I'm actually really interested to hear other people's thoughts on that, because I'm not, I think you have to at some point make that transition and have the brand be an extension of you. But and then you make your like cameo appearances and everyone gets excited.
Yeah, I would just turn it around. I turn the question around. If you have a chance as a founder to talk to consumers, why would you want to miss that opportunity? And I still do demos today, not as many as I used to, but it allows me to get that true one-on-one conversation. So it's less about how much the consumer might be excited, and it's more how excited I am to hear what consumers have to say. So my recommendation is time is precious, but always try and make that part of your schedule.
Yeah, and I know Lisa's doing a bunch of them.
I think we learn so much every time we're in a store, and for us, we launched during the pandemic, and so we haven't had a chance to demo, and we were initially planning for that to be a significant piece of our plan. So we're excited to get back out there. But as a founder, I think you have to be precious with where and how you spend your time. And so for us, we're thinking about it as like being in the places where we can reach most people and learn the most as where we kind of devote our demo time.
What I would recommend to you is definitely everyone is ready for open samples. I think it's just, there's also something about seeing it, get poured into a little cup or having someone chop it up in front of you. And we're ready to help you. Regarding a founder going out and doing samples, it's definitely part of your growth journey and it's part of your transition. So in the beginning, I think you should do it. You will learn not only how your consumers are looking at it and who's actually shopping, but you're also going to learn how your retailers are supporting you on the shelf. I encourage that you have your team do it. And then as you expand, this is where we come in. And the benefit of working with us is that you get all of that data store by store. That will allow you, and you get the pictures. So you get the pictures of the shelf and you get the picture of the person sampling. So I would definitely recommend doing that. And then because we give you the data, if there is an area or a type of retailer that is standing out or being, for good or for negative reasons, go visit, get your own assessment of what's going on there, and then spend your travel dollars and your time very, very, your time is the most valuable, but spend it very judiciously. But I agree with Joel, don't ever let it go completely. Be part of what that journey is. And then when you partner with someone, if they're really your partner, what you have learned can be incorporated into the types of questions and the types of education that the brand ambassador is doing on behalf of your brand.
I love that and totally agree.
Wow, you guys are amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
The actual person who's amazing is Joanna, and if you want to unmute and say hello, please do.
Hi, everyone. These are powerful stories. I love it.
Hi, thank you. All right, last couple of minutes, we have a couple questions about GoPuff. I would say like we don't have GoPuff experts on here, but I can definitely look into putting together a workshop around GoPuff for those who are interested, because there seems to be a lot of excitement there. What's been the experience of working with needing brokers in the Midwest compared to other regions? Do you feel like you have to have brokers, or buyers are open to going directly?
We don't have a broker in the Midwest, so I can't speak to that. We've been going direct. So we do have a broker in California, which I guess, you know, we have less relationships there. So, but yeah, as of now, I'm our, you know, sales officer, been working the distributor relationships and store relationships and going that route. So.
Yeah, we do have a broker who covers the Midwest, but we've had most success on the coast. Going back to the point around the ecosystem here, I think with KeHE being here, with so many great retail partners being here, there is enough to like dig your hands into to do it on your own. And so that's where a lot of our efforts are focused, and really cultivating those Midwest partnerships.
I recommend that everyone tap into their networks, their regional networks, and then the bright benefit of being in those incubators and part of Chicagoland and part of Food Bevy is that you then meet those founders that have success in other parts of the region.
Yeah, completely agree. I think.
And if I may say one thing, because I just remembered on samples, all of those packaged samples that everyone has done, we have been recommending to people that you use those discovery services like a sampler.io, or, you know, even it's kind of pricey, but giving them to Instacart for Instacart to put into the bags when they are delivering. They're definitely of value. They're a bit on the pricey side, but you can get a lot of education and trial in those zip codes that you might not have invested in the past otherwise. And that data, zip code data, geographic data, is going to be useful for you.
Awesome. Absolutely love that. And that's a huge tip there. Perfect. Well, I think we got to most of those. If there's any questions that we missed, feel free to send myself an email and I can forward those to our panelists. But I just want to thank you all again, Joel, Tina, Emily, Perteet, for being on. This has been amazing. Thanks so much, everyone, for your questions. And make sure to keep an eye out for our part 2 series. We'll be talking with Dom's Market in a couple of weeks here and others. You'll get an email to register for that. So thank you so much again, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thank you, everyone.
It was so fun. Thank you.